Hey, and welcome back to episode 2, where we're going through Build a PC Reddit page and answering some of these questions. So let's get started. First one on the list. So to answer this question, there's a couple things we need to be thinking about is what is the best price per dollar and what is your actual applications that you're searching for on this particular one. First off, on the 58 or the 5600, I would probably not even get that. So that's sitting right around $140. Whereas you can get the 5600X for $120. So right there, that's already kind of a better choice anyways. And the other thing that I'd look at is on the Intel i5. So if I was in that situation and looking at that seriously, so what's your upgrade path, right? And are you planning to upgrade? So being stuck on AIM-4 with the 5600, you're looking at the best CPA you're probably going to get is like a 5800 X3D for gaming. Whereas the Intel i5, you've got all of 13th gen and 14th gen if you believe that 14th gen is any better than 13th or even 12th. But you're looking at stuff like 12700 KF, which is $189. So if I were in this situation looking at this, I would really, if you're planning to do any more than gaming, I would try to save up a little bit more money and get that 12700 KF. It really kind of depends on the rest of your build. What's your GPU? If you can kind of scrounge that money together, I'd definitely consider it, just because that's got the efficiency cores as well, which are going to really help with your background tasks. But of course, I use my computer for, video editing and photo editing and all these other things. It really just kind of depends on what you are planning to use it for. So the next question we're going to address is this one. So did I make the wrong move with their PSU wattage size? So he's got a 7800 X3D and a 79 XT, which he believes only needs 600 watts of power. Since it is an Intel and it's not NVIDIA, I'd almost believe it. But just because that's what it's going to draw isn't necessarily what you want, which he kind of referenced here further down. So he talks about efficiency of a power supply. So he looked at an 850 watt, he looked at a 1300 watt. So what you want to do when you look at a power supply, so this is the thing that he referenced here, and look at the efficiency curves. So as you can see, as we progress down and we start using more wattage, we actually are getting less and less efficient, meaning that we are pulling more power from the wall and we're losing a lot more to heat. So a fan is going to be running at a higher speed in order to compensate for that extra heat. So you really want to try to really stay right in this type of range. Right as it starts to dip back down, of course, ideally you would be right here, but yeah, you're not going to buy an 850 watt power supply and use only 250 watts. So you're really looking to try to keep that right in that half to 2/3 range in order to allow for some extra playroom. So where he's sitting here talking about the fact that the 1300 watt was actually on sale as well, power supplies are one of the few things that you can actually future-proof with, whereas everything else in your computer build, it's very future-proofing, means you might get a little bit more life out of it, whereas power supplies, if you buy a solid power supply that has a great warranty, then you should expect it to be in your build for 10 to the 15 years or whatever the warranty is. The only time that comes into effect is if they change power plugs. So the 3000 series NVIDIA cards, they went over to the 12 volt high power plug, but they also provide adapters for that. Or you can just buy specifically that cable in order to go from your power supply to your graphics card. So power supplies are one of those things that it can really hurt you if you go too short, or you buy a cheap one, you can actually damage other computer components. So spending a little bit extra on your power supply is never a bad move if you have the budget for it. Moving on to this next one. So they've got a 5600 non-X and a GTX 1066 gigabyte is if going to last me a while. Just found an old system in my storage room. They're not too sure how long this is going to last. So the way you really want to gauge how long things are going to last is you want to look at consoles, right? Because there's a lot of developers that exclusively build games for consoles, or there's developers that build stuff for your PCs, but they always plan to port it over to consoles. So you don't really want to waste tons of extra time on high-end specs or lower specs than what your console are, right? That's all just extra effort. So in this case with a 1060, I think that you're really going to start struggling. Once you start seeing only next gen titles, the 1060 is just not going to be enough for those particular titles because the consoles were based around AMD 6700 is about similar to what you're going to find on a console. So where you're at a 1060, you're significantly older. The 6700X has more VRAM. So yes, I would definitely be looking at upgrading this, especially the GPU. The CPU you might be able to get away with for a bit, especially if you have sufficient RAM to run a lot of these titles. So 16 gigs, there's a possibility this system looks old enough that you could be running 8 gigs or 12 gigs. So look at trying to make sure that that is as fast as possible. Another thing that might give it a little bit additional runway is if you switch over to like a 5800X3D or something along those lines. That has that 3D cache. Those are really useful for systems to essentially extend out their life. So in that case, you wouldn't be replacing your motherboard or your RAM. You'd just be replacing your CPU. But yes, definitely the GPU you need to be looking at changing out. On to the next question. So adding fast RAM into my build. So they currently has a 5200 megahertz stick, and then he's looking at adding in a 5600 megahertz stick and questioning whether or not this is going to cause instabilities. So anytime you're mixing RAM, you run the risk. In order to mitigate that risk, you can always downclock your memory, and that seems to always help a little bit. So in this case, you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to run at 5200 megahertz. And DDR5 isn't as stable as what you're going to find with DDR4 just because it's more mature. So DDR5, you're going to expect instabilities to begin with. So if this person is just gets given this RAM, I'd definitely try it out. But it's one of those things where I wouldn't go out and spend lots of money on this without the ability to return it. Worst case, you try it out, you stick it in, it doesn't work, you can't get stabilities, or you can't get stability within it, and then you just go return it. So definitely try to run games and stuff that hit your RAM pretty well early on, and just always have that in the back of your mind. I can return this if it doesn't work. And right before the return window ends, you need to reevaluate and say whether or not this is actually working the way it should, and then kind of go from there. Thanks everybody for tuning into this episode of Build a PC on Reddit. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. If you want your questions answered, I've started up a Discord server where you can go in and add your own particular questions, and I will always do those before I go to this Reddit page. If you just have a really quick question, I will normally just respond to it. Otherwise, it might show up in the next episode, and then we'll feature that and we'll talk through it. But I appreciate everybody's time, and have a good one.